Good morning. We're live this morning with Amber O'Neal Johnston. You may know her from Heritage Moms, but today she's going to be talking to us about teenagers and slow living and how you can raise a successful teenager who's not a stressful teenager, which is something all of us want.
Definitely.
Definitely. Thank you for joining us, Amber.
I appreciate you having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I want to remind everyone who's listening and watching us live that you'll be taking their questions and comments live. So if you have a question or comment for Amber, just put it in the comment section and we'll read it online and she will address it live. Thank you. Yes. Amber, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you came to this thought and parenting practice?
I would love to. So I, growing up, was a naturally academic-minded child. So just right along with every stereotype you can think of, straight A's, participated in my district's gifted program. I was bused to the local high school for math when I was in middle school. I received a full academic scholarship to undergrad and grad school, and I gave school my all, and I totally saw results. So I began my career in corporate America. I worked for several different companies there, and I was quickly given more responsibility and repeatedly promoted in a very short time frame. The money was rolling in just as it had been promised, and I had all of the career success that everyone told me would come. But the pot at the end of the rainbow felt really empty for me. There was this, I guess you could call it, hollowness inside that I couldn't quite articulate at the time. And I felt let down that I'd leaned in so far and didn't feel content with life after what I usually call the big push. And one year, my mom gave me a bunch of sweet little mementos from my childhood. And among the memories was a piece of paper from third grade. The teacher asked us to write about what we wanted to be when we grew up. And my paper said, I want to be a wife and a mother. And I remembered the little girl who had written that. And so I remembered how many times during the course of my academic and corporate career, I had reiterated that my goal was to be a stay-at-home mom. And how many times people had scoffed or ignored what I was saying because they couldn't see past the track I was on. And so eventually I quit corporate America and went down the route of entrepreneurship and the ability to run a business that was rooted in passion, something that I feel passionate about while raising a family as a stay-at-home mom, the thing I always knew I wanted to be. And it helped me to see that success and a socially impressive or high-powered career are not the same. I learned that success in pursuing a life of purpose has to deal with having a spirit of contentment. And so I started becoming involved in spreading that news and that message to families with children and teens, that asking parents perhaps to look at giving their children the confidence to giving them language, confidence, and tools for slow living in this crazy, high-pressured and fast-paced world. So that's kind of how I landed here.
Okay. And just in a couple of sentences, describe slow living and describe how it relates specifically to teenagers.
Okay. So slow living, it means different things to different people, but in general, it's the process of striving for a simpler and more meaningful life pursued at a sustainable pace. So for those who haven't embraced or even dabbled in it, the concept of slow living can be easily dismissed, but it's actually a very intentional resistance to what one writer describes as the grind culture that glamorizes busyness and a mindless flurry.
Okay, so I'm typing as you're talking for our audience. Sustainable pace. That seems key to me. How can a family help its teenager and everybody in the family really realize what their sustainable pace is?
Wow, there are a lot of different ways. You have to find what works for your family, but some of the things that I've seen repeatedly garner success are to help your teen connect their academic strengths to hobbies that play into those strengths. So if they choose to turn some of those hobbies into a business, you definitely should support them all the way, but that's nowhere near the point. The idea is to help them recognize that they're good at things, and to see how the things that they're good at can manifest in other areas that offer restoration rather than depletion. So, for example, one of my daughters loves chemistry. She's just always been passionate about it. She likes the ideas of dealing with the properties, the chemicals, seeing changes that happen. And that love of chemistry has parlayed into her having a hobby of making soap. So soap and making soap from scratch involves reactions like saponification and mixing and starting with a set of raw materials and ending up with something else. And to someone else, those things may seem completely unrelated, but she was able to take that academic strength and turn it into something that brings her peace and makes her feel like she has purpose in her hobbies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What are the benefits of slow living or following natural rhythms for teenagers?
Well, I think it gives teens the opportunity to rest and unplug. And that's something that a lot of people don't learn until they become burnt out or until it's too late. So a lot of people think that when I say rest or unplug, that means to just do nothing. But I like to consider that a change is as good as a break. So doing things like traveling out of the country or camping off grid or taking inspiring electives that feed their hearts or things that fan the flame of their interests, even if they're not the most popular or the most prestigious options. Those are the types of things parents can help their kids with. Teens today are under an immense amount of pressure to hurry up and finish college so they can hurry up and work. And it really makes no sense if you think of that in that way. So I think encouraging teens to do things like taking a gap year, to explore programs outside the realm of school and resumes, and gap years can give teens the permission they need to dive deeply into meaningful work and pursue passions and do things with like wild abandon. And I think that parents are the only ones who really can give their children that permission to live outside the confines of what's expected of them.
Okay. I like that, what's expected of them. When we spoke earlier, we were having a great conversation before we went live. We talked about white space and what can happen in the white space and how that leads to some of the success that we already identify for our teenagers. So we're not saying that they should abandon our definitions of success, but how they reach those goals can be different if they embrace this slow living. Can you speak more to that and maybe give us an example?
Definitely. One example that comes to mind, it's near and dear to me, is one of my nephews. Most of the people in my family have pursued a very traditional route, just like what I was seeking in the beginning, and they've had varying degrees of satisfaction. But traditionally, there's been an unwritten rule that we're all supposed to press in really hard academically and give all that we can to this one endeavor so that we can catapult into a career and then give that all we have. But my oldest nephew has always felt pulled in another direction. It was really hard for him to stand up against the family. I remember him calling me and saying, like, I'm scared to tell everyone that I don't want to do what everyone else is telling me that I should do. But I was like, you have to stake your claim and chart new territory. So he had dreams of becoming a master gardener and a horticulturist. So that is like not something that has ever been seen before in my family. And after a couple of false starts and failed attempts to do what everyone else expected of him, he chose to pursue his dreams. He recently left his full-time employer, which was a great job in his field, to launch his own business. And the success on his own terms has been so much sweeter than anything that he could have manufactured using someone else's roadmap. So again, the idea of pursuing passions, slowing down, examining what brings you joy in no way is synonymous with pulling out of life or just giving up or lowering the bar. And I see it as the opposite in most cases. These kids are breaking out and doing phenomenal things well beyond what we ever could have imagined for them.
I love that. It's not synonymous with pulling out of life or lowering the bar. That's not what we're talking about here. Now, I hear a lot of parents say, they're worried because their teen hasn't identified a passion. We all want our teens to excel at something. They have to become experts at something, and that's fine if they do, and it's fine if they don't, if they're a Jack or Jill of all trades. But if we're interested and concerned about this, and we want to help our teen identify a passion, and we are willing to give them this white space to do it, how do we direct them when they're there so that they're, not just sleeping or video gaming, but how do we direct them, as you say, to not just drop out, but to use the opportunity to explore?
That's a really good question. I think first and foremost is that we have to model slow living and intentional choices by letting our teens see us enjoying life outside the rat race. So they need a model, an idea, something to look at and say, I've seen someone be successful and I see how they use their time and what they're doing. I think we can help our teens explore different interests and find what brings them joy. That doesn't mean that their duties are going unfulfilled. Or that they can do anything that doesn't ignite, or that they don't have to do anything that doesn't ignite them. But I think finding balance is something that doesn't usually come naturally. And our teens may need our help identifying enriching hobbies and meaningful ways to spend their time. I think that we need to purge the idea that people have to show up the same way in everything they pursue. So excellence is admirable, but that's not nearly as life-giving as the idea of best effort. So excellence, I feel, with teens, it means that we've set a target for them to hit, and we are expecting them to hit that same target with everything they do. But letting them know that best effort is the goal it gives allowances, and it allows them to make allowances for natural rhythms and competing priorities and quirky days and times where they may not be producing at the same rate all the time. So I think just even a change of language that, I know for a lot of parents, it's like, I expect excellence out of you every time.
Yes.
And that's a lot of pressure. It's not always realistic. I think other things can be not so closely associated with finding this one particular passion or joy, but maybe helping our kids understand that being smart or successful is not the same as constantly producing. We can create family traditions that tether our teens to something bigger than just the next deadline. And I think that for me, it's about making sure that teens know that you see them and that you like what you see.
I like the idea of us changing our definition of success and unlocking it from constantly producing.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, we're not doing these things in a silo. We're not living in a silo. So how do we help our teens if they're willing to embrace this lifestyle, but they still attend the regular high school with maybe a prep school model or, the intense sports environment? How do we help them maintain it in those environments?
I think that making sure that you are asking them questions, not that they owe you an answer, but that you're giving them questions that they can ask themselves. Is this a good use of my time? Do I want to do this, or do I just feel like I should do this? Is this something that's going to bring me joy? Is it something that's going to help me reach a goal? Or is it just pouring in more of this busyness? This was really brought to light to me about 4 or 5 years ago. A good friend of mine got a dream job opportunity outside of the state, and her daughter was a senior in high school and wanted to finish out her high school career with her friends. So she moved in with my family, and I never saw her. And it wasn't because she was out, we have this picture of teenagers having the best time of their lives and partying and doing all this. She wasn't. She was tutoring. She was serving in community service. She was involved in every extracurricular activity. She was playing a sport. She was studying. She was doing this group and this activity and that, and meeting with mentors and participating in mentorship programs. And one night in the middle of the night when she got home, I remember sitting on the couch. I was nursing a baby at the time. And I just asked her, I was like, "Are you happy?" And she started crying. And she was like, "This is what I feel I have to do to reach my goals. This is what the school counselor and everyone is telling me. We have to have this certain resume to be successful, to get into college, to do all these things." And so I tried to talk her through that and what that might look like and how she could reach her goals without while still maintaining her sense of peace. I think we've seen that recently with the Olympics and Simone Biles, and that the idea that sometimes our child's mental health has to supersede the idea of success. And ultimately, she kept going and she got into her dream school, and she only lasted a year. She ended up transferring somewhere else that wouldn't have required all of the crazy things she was doing, and she's so much happier. And I just think that we have to allow our children to participate in what they see as success, and that might not be the same thing that the parents necessarily see.
I understand. In our, I'm going to call it our pregame conversation, we talked about the fact that students can do these, they can take their own path, they can take a slower path and still get to the same goal, whether it's, you know, the Ivy League school or the job training program or something. Do you have any examples of that? I remember we talked about the fact that this is an opportunity for them to differentiate themselves, which is really what the employer or school is looking for, more so than how busy the student is.
That's right. So in the beginning, years ago, the idea that you could be first chair at violin and be the student government president and be the starting basketball team and get straight A's and in all of your AP classes, those were things that were setting people apart. But now that's what every child's being pushed to, whether they have the capacity for it or not. And I think that I homeschool my family, and part of what I've been able to see in that arena, homeschooled teens have to really set themselves apart because they don't necessarily have all of the busyness to back up what they're saying that they can do at these schools. And Ivy League schools are clamoring for them. They're usually presenting portfolios of passionate work. And that is now what's setting them apart. These are teens who have launched successful businesses, who have gone deeply into areas that bring them intense joy. And therefore, they've been able to show bring a new and fresh idea to this. So rather than just signing up for things and doing a bunch, I think that these admissions officers are starting to see past that, and they're looking for more. They're looking for something deeper, and they're looking for teens who can show that not just that they're well-rounded, but that they are brave and dedicated.
I love that. Teens that are brave, that are who are taking risks. We have a question from Christina. Christina asks, what is the opportunity cost, and is it worth it for mental health?
I think that's such a good point. And yes, I would have to say it is. I mean, before I quit my corporate career, and I don't like to focus on money, but I like to tell people that now my business is bringing me the same things that everyone said I was walking away from there. But when I was preparing to leave, I felt ill. I remember going to the doctor and saying that I think I have some type of joint issue. My joints are really painful. My stomach is always hurting. I don't know if I have something going on. They ran all of these tests. They could never find anything. When I slid my 2 weeks notice across the desk, that was the last day that I ever felt that intense joint pain. And all of the issues I thought I was having in my gut completely went away. I realized that the doctors, the one thing they never told me to do was to talk to someone, a therapist. And what I needed was to be able to express the fact that I was in a pressure cooker that I didn't want to participate in. And so I think that the opportunity cost is that in exchange for pushing our teens to become cookie cutter images of this one view of how you reach success, I think that what they'll get is we may not get a whole picture of what society views as success today, but we'll get a whole person. And I think that's worth the trade-off.
A whole person. I love that. Thank you, Christine. If anybody else has a question or comment, please put it in the comment section and we'll address those live on air. Now, as anything we discuss, there's not one-stop shopping or one size fits all. If your teen seems to thrive in the pressure cooker, and some do, I think probably far less than we think, but some do, then by all means, don't change what they're doing, but check in with them. Because when you check in with them, you may find, as Amber found with, was that your niece?
My nephew. Hmm.
Your nephew, or who cried when you asked, "Are you happy?" Doing all these
Oh,
things.
my friend's daughter. Yes. Yeah.
It's your
She cried.
daughter.
She
Yeah.
didn't, that wasn't what she wanted to do, but she was so good at it. And I think I
Mhm,
can identify with that. When you see a child and they're so good at it and they're doing it,
mhm,
we immediately think like, oh, they like this. This is what they
mhm,
want to be doing. But
mhm,
I think that we have to, again, you don't have to try to change them if a child is passionate about what they're,
mhm.
the rat race, but I don't think most kids are. But I think that we haven't given them permission to
Yes.
try something else. They
Yes.
are teens, but they're still children.
Mhm,
And a lot of times they're looking for the adults in their lives to give them permission to try something different. And
mhm,
so, to your point, I don't think it's good to ever force them off of a path if that's where they want to be. But I think it is good to let them know that this is not the only path to your
mhm.
end game.
Wonderful. What, excuse me, what hints or best practices do you have for parents who are interested in helping their children explore passions deeply, take a step back, lean out instead of in, and also communicate to their student? Because students are very nervous about the fact that if they don't do what everybody else is doing, and it's peer pressure more than anything else, and a fear of what will happen in the future. How do we communicate to them that I'm going to give you the space, but the space is so that you can actually achieve these goals of yours? I'm not changing your goals. You're welcome to change them, but I'm not changing them. I'm just showing you an alternative way to get there.
Well, I definitely think this is where mentorship and community, the idea that it takes a village to raise a child. I know
Mhm,
that I'm playing that role in the lives of several teens, and I know that there are other adults who are pouring into my children in much the same way. So it's very difficult to tell your teen that they can take this path less traveled when no one else is taking it. That doesn't
mhm,
seem like a good bet. But to put them in environments where they can meet other people who
mhm,
have done what they want to do in a different way, or
mhm,
have done something completely different.
mhm,
So I think also part of it has to do with the way you talk about things. We talk about college in our home. We talk about traveling in the world. We travel the world.
mhm,
We talk about and uphold, or our children hear us admiring people
mhm,
who have done things differently and found success on their own terms.
mhm,
And I think that just kind of creating a family culture around the idea that traditional paths are excellent when you want to be on a traditional path, but there are alternatives that are just as excellent if that's a better match for who you were made to be.
mhm. You mentioned putting your students in environments. I'm assuming there are networks and clusters. Can you speak to that? And even if you can give us samples of a few for people who are interested, they can maybe Google these networks to help them cultivate an environment which is encouraging of a slower living teen.
Sure. I think that, I mean, there's so many. I think that if you're in a town where you don't have a lot of resources, I've seen people with great success finding mentors and direction, even on websites like OutSchool, where you
Mhm,
have these individual people who are passionate about certain subjects, and they're teaching students all over the world on all these various things, and they have one-to-one direct contact with these people. Some of them are teachers, but the vast majority of the ones that I've seen aren't necessarily credentialed teachers in the most traditional sense, but they are teachers because they have something to teach our children. And they can find people. If your child's deeply involved in oceanography and you live in the middle of Iowa, there are opportunities for them to log on and meet someone who can point them in those directions. I think that also even micro communities of things that revolve around book clubs.
mhm,
They're pulling in people from other aspects of the community. It can be a teen adult book club. I think that opportunities where you're asking your children to bring their friends to do something that feels radically different. My family, were big campers, and we love shaking things up with teens and other children to say, hey, why don't you come out in the woods with us for the weekend and just see? I don't know what's going to happen. Let's just see what happens. We're out there. Yeah. oh, the cell phone stops working about 30 minutes out, but I swear you're going to have a great time. So I think that, being able to just gather around a fire and stay up late at night talking, shooting the breeze with people who are older than you, who have experience under their belt, that can ignite passion, that can inspire you to think bigger and broader than what you may hear at a presentation in school. So I think those are all things. I don't think it always has to be something formal. One more thing, children that show a certain affinity towards a type of what I call handicrafts, or something that making something with their hands, finding master artisans in your area. These people love to share. And I think that just allowing your child to be near that person and soak it up. It doesn't mean that your child's going to become a blacksmith or start forging knives or beading as a profession. They may, but it does mean that they can be in touch with someone who finds delight in something that no one else ever talks about.
That's a wonderful, wonderful recommendation. We have a comment from Karen. Karen says, for us, it was about balance. There were some programs that I had my son participate in so that he could be successful when applying for scholarship. However, he had plenty of free time doing things he liked to do. My daughter loved doing a lot of activities. For both, we stepped back from some of the activities they disliked. So soccer, band, and swimming were taken off of the table because they were not interested. And I think what Karen, I will add to what Karen said, that it must be difficult to step away from something that they don't like if they excel at it.
And I think it's more difficult, I think, for the parents than it is for the teens, from what I've seen. The idea that you see your child and you see the capacity and the promise that they show in a certain area. I experienced this with one of my daughters with swimming. She was doing a great job. She was winning races. She has a swimmer's body. She was made for it, or so I thought. And she just came to me and she said, this is not something that I want to put my all into. I don't like this. And my first reaction, you're so good at it. And she said, I don't mean to be. Just I got in the water and this is what happened. And she's like, but it doesn't bring me joy. And I said, okay. And I had to go, cry in my pillow for a second. But I looked at it and I said, brave girl. I'm proud that I raised her in a way that she felt confident that she could come to me and let me know, Mom, this is not my jam. Yes. And I owed it to her to say, okay, that's it. We're going to pursue something else. So I think it's the parents that have to do the exercise and the emotional work there more often than it is the teen.
Karen says it was swimming for her family too, and exactly, she agrees. I will back up this with Karen's advice about the balance is wonderful, and I imagine you're just constantly shifting to find that balance, especially with multiple children. We have a teen who excels academically and musically, and spends his summers deep in those areas, and was eligible for he had a host of options this summer. And came to me after I kept harassing him. Which one are you taking? Which one? It's your choice. You have this list. It's your choice. And he finally admitted in a roundabout way that he didn't want to do any of them. That he said he'd been doing them for years. He'd just come off of a very difficult academic year during a pandemic. He's going into his senior year, which is going to be even more difficult. Plus, he'd be applying to colleges, and he wanted to work in the summer, but it didn't have to be a focused internship guiding towards something. We're readers. We love to read. And he's like, I think I want to be surrounded by books. So he got a job at a local independent bookstore. And for parents who was like, oh, my kid could never drop out of all these things. And trust me, it bothered me. It really bothered me. But I was trying to, I'm trying to let him lead. It's his life, and he needs to know when he needs to step away, and I can't force him. It turns out during this job, he learned so much about business. He was surrounded by books, which he loves, but because it was a small bookstore, he was able to do more than he would have been able to do maybe at a chain. And he has learned a lot about being an entrepreneur, probably more than he would have learned at a university course on entrepreneurship. So there are hidden gems, or there are pots of gold at the end of the rainbow, however you want to term it, if you let your child lead. But I won't tell you it's easy, because it wasn't easy.
That is such a beautiful example. And you know what it brings to mind for me is as an adult, when I'm out with friends and we're enjoying dinner or we're out for drinks, the things that they talk about, the things that people bring up and discuss, it's the summer that they spent working at the little independent bookstore that they talk about. These are the things where we get some of our biggest life lessons. No one's ever talking about, man, I was grinding it out one year, and let me tell you all the things I accomplished and all the certificates I got. And there may be some of those that are very important to them, but even when adults think back on the things that they enjoyed, it wasn't the accolades or the external affirmation that they talk about. It's the way it felt to achieve, even if it was something that led to an award. So I think that your example is such a great one.
The way it felt to achieve. That's wonderful. So we have to make sure that our students understand that and that we're looking for that when we're assessing them, because we're always doing that. We're about at the end of our time together. I like to ask people if there's one takeaway that a listener has from listening to this conversation. What should it be? The one thing that they should remember if they don't remember anything else?
I think the one thing is that your child is a born person. They are teens, they are individuals, they are people, and that as parents, we can guide them. We can become allies with our children in their lives and guide them in a way that allows them and gives them permission to listen to themselves.
Wonderful. I love that. Give our children permission to listen to themselves.
Yeah.
We're going to end it right there. That was perfect. Thank you so much, Amber. This was wonderful. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.